Wonderful. Thank you. Well, thank you everybody for making the time today, joining us in our first webinar for 2026. Now, our Ascalite Learning Design Special Interest Group. So welcome to our webinar. So we're focusing on introducing research for third space individuals. Now, our particular webinar is in partnership with our Ascalite Community Mentoring Program. And we're offering a series of topics related to foundations of research. What is research? How to disseminate methodologies, and using everyday practices, what you do in this space. And what we thought, one of the main topics, one of the key questions that keep popping up is around at third space, and third space has different definitions, have different takes around this, and we have a great set of panelists, Keith, Haggard, Kashmira, and Kate here today to share that around what is this third space, what are the opportunities for research around that. I've got a bunch of questions that I'm going to help moderate, and our sessions are very free-flowing around this, and we're open to questions in between in the chat, and also there's opportunities at the end as well where we can work with you if you've got key questions around unpacking what does research mean in your context, in your place. We're happy to have a chat about that and unpack that a bit as well. So just moving forward, but before we get into the crux of our webinar, I would like to recognise the traditional owners of our Indigenous cultures, and feel free to also recognise this in the chat within your context. Acknowledge that there are traditional owners of the land in which we are meeting, and I'm currently residing in the Bunurong lands. We respect our elders past and present, and also extend this to those emerging, and also for people of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander who's joining us here today as well. So welcome everybody. Let's keep going. Now, short plug around what we do here. So our Learning Design Special Interest Group is led by Kashmira, myself, Keith, and also Kate. And we've got a wonderful, huge community. We have a LinkedIn group, QR codes there. I think we are at 1,800 members within that group. And it's just a wonderful group online in LinkedIn, sharing ideas, events, activities. And this is where a lot of our communications and our events are communicated, sharing of practice, job opportunities, maybe reviewing materials, etc. So building valuable connections there. In 2026, we are having this research, series of topics. We're working on open educational resources, webinars, hackathons, and a lot about building community and resources in learning design. And we have a 2026 conference coming up in Brisbane, just a minor error there. So 2026, it's happening in Brisbane in Regis South Bank. So hopefully see you all there in the next few months. All right, without further ado, now I'll be moderating this this session. We've got the wonderful Kate, and I thought, introduction to research, we thought in the third space. And all of us have unique pathways and how we came about in this particular area of research and third space and the context of where we work. And we thought it's a great opportunity to just share this a bit further about what Kate does, Kashmir, and Keith, because we all have various pathways. And some of you here may be in a situation like that, whether you're early in your career or you're already in there, or you've had many different experiences and capabilities in this space. But it's a great opportunity to ask these questions. And the purpose of today is really having this peer level conversation on how research works in the third space and from lived experiences. And really also looking at digging deeper into our individuals here, so Kate, Kashmira, and Keith, but also would love to hear from others within this room as well. What I'll do is, I've got a bunch of questions, so I'm happy to ask that, and also we'll have a series of questions from the audience. So let's get started on this. I'm kind of curious now, and I'll go for each one of you as well. So the first set of question is, how does research show up in your current role? So if I could ask, Keith, Kashmira, and Kate to have a think about introducing your role, but also answering the question, how does research show up in your current role? So I'm going to throw it to Keith because you're first down on my list, down from the panel. So How much
Oh,
research showing your current role? What is your current role?
I feel like a total fraud in this community answering this question because I am no longer a third spacer. I'm no longer an pracademic or anything like that. I'm now fully much an academic, and have been for a couple of years. So research is kind of what I do now, as well as a little bit of teaching and a little bit of service. Having said that, my focus on research in this community is still very much on learning design. But what I do want to say in relation to that, Leanne, is that I'm very conscious that of the challenges and the kind of struggles that I faced when I was a PhD student slash learning designer, and just finding my feet in academia and wanting to do research on what I was seeing, but not being paid to do research. And so what I've really made a commitment to do, and the reason why I wanted to be part of this panel, um, is to find ways that, for me, it's especially learning designers, but people in the third space can find ways that they can be part of the research process and be recognized for that. I think that's really important, um, as opposed to, just having their work being taken advantage of. Yeah, but finding ways to support them now that I've got the benefit of time. And as the webinar goes on, I'm more than happy to share some of the examples and some of the ideas that I've got in relation to that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that. I think yeah, yeah, I've got different perspectives and views around the third space. I mean, I do consider academics within the third space area, and you are at the moment, as you say, an academic for now as well, but you've had different journeys around that. I might pull it over to Kate. What your perspective around this? Like, how does research show up in your current role? Just a bit of introduction about what you do in that and the
Yeah,
context around that.
sure. I'm sorry, I can hear myself coming back in through my headphones. I'm a senior learning designer at the University of Melbourne. Um, I've worked at a bunch of different institutions as a learning designer over the past 20 years. I I mean, a lot of the research I do is really just like teaming up with Kashmira. Shout out to Kashmira. But I've had to get kind of creative and strategic about like how I make it fit in my workload. Sometimes that's doing it on the side. Some at the moment I'm able to do it in my work because I've managed to find a project that aligns to something we need for work. And so I can use some of work time. In other instances, and also, my current manager is quite open to us kind of, doing something. So as long as it's still meeting the outputs that we need for uni and it kind of fits within that, obviously, I still also can include things like reading if it's professional development related to my work. So it's really kind of, I tend to choose projects that will fit within that these days, so that I can at least try and use some of my work time where that's relevant, while also then still sometimes needing to use outside time. If it's something that's not completely relevant to my work or harder to justify, like some of the third space research we do, then it's really choosing times when that is feasible and sustainable. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, I find that like working strategically to look at like what things can I justify and integrate into my work, or what things can I bring from my work, that I can then build upon through research channels. I do that partly because there's other times where I just can't get attribution for my work within my workplace as well. A lot of the guides and things that we do on our website have to be attributed to the team or to the institution rather than listing individuals. But if I have research, then I can be doing the work that I think is important and adding to the field, and then I can cite myself when I write guides. So, it does mean that sometimes you're making a bit of a decision around, do I get paid for this on the unis, or am I doing it for the attribution? But that's sometimes how I get around just doing that work. And I think also just partnering with people, and that's where I do a lot of work with Kashmira, and we could talk a bit more about that.
Fantastic. I think, yeah, you've got a really rich lived experience for us to unpack further as well. But it's great to hear all the various, I think, type of concerns and issues that you've brought up, which is fantastic, and we'll definitely unpack that. I'm going to throw it over to you, Kashmira, but before I do that, I'm going to stop sharing because then the slide just takes over everyone's view, but I'll just take that off. So we've got a small knit group, so I'll stop sharing, but I'll throw it over to you, Kashmira, to just really look at the research context and how that shows up in your current role, and also just introducing a bit about what you do so everyone's across that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my role is academic role, but I'm academic developer, and so it is teaching focused. What that means is that I don't have time, like defined time for research, but it's a bit confusing in a sense that my role is to develop and improve scholarship of learning and teaching without having a research allocation into my role. However, I think I am one of those lucky third space professionals who has quite a bit of autonomy on what I do. So I use my time in whatever way that I want. And I think in due course, there are more questions around how you can merge your work or how you can identify your work with some of the research project that we will discuss in due course. But I think I be very strategic around what I want to get involved and how much. And in I think in next few questions we will talk about how it can be managed and what are the key aspects of that. So I will just leave it until then, Leon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think every single one of you have brought up the fact of, turning everyday work into something researchable. And like every single one of you have mentioned that. And I really want to unpack that a little bit. And if you could share just with our community here, maybe pick out one or two projects or initiatives, part of your everyday work, and you've actually turned that into something researchable. Like, happy for anyone to start. Just give one or two examples, but whether it's something small, medium, or big, have a think about that. So then, others in the room can actually, relate to that.
So I can get started. So, for example, I'm coordinating two many different programs, but one of them is Advanced SIG Fellowship. And I have to review a lot of application. And what I saw was that reflective writing is a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought that, okay, if I run workshops that teaches them reflective writing and all of that, people may or may not turn up. And again, I have to write like lots and lots of. So I just thought, how can I reduce my workload in reviewing these applications and do something more meaningful with that? So that was for past 2 years. So this year, what I did is I have opened up an initiative called e-portfolio, professional e-portfolio development for staff. And people opted in because it will be helpful for their promotion and you can sell it well. So once I have that launched, as a part of writing the professional, like for example, reflecting account of practice as a professional in the e-portfolio and all of that, I have included a lot of workshops and things around reflective writing. So when they are ready with like all they will learn reflective writing, that will help me with the HE fellowship as well. So that's like hitting two birds by one stone. But also that while I was doing this e-portfolio workshop series, which is like 6 workshop and a lot of one-on-one mentoring, I have turned that into a research project as well. So I have sought ethics approval for that. So there are two benefits. If I want to put this project in place at a scale, I can show that, okay, here is my pilot project results and here is how it benefited. So, and I can publish out of it if I have the ethics. So it is my work, which I was to do anyway, which I turned into a research project.
Mm. Wonderful. So that's killing two birds with one stone. I think that's the message going across as well around that, but trying to unpack further around the learning. You've got no, that wasn't a hands up, that was an applause, but I'm gonna throw it over to you, Kate, anyways.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think you do have to like, and I'm trying not to use that metaphor because it's like it's a bit violent, but I definitely everything I do is kind of the same. I think also, I guess just recognizing who's in the room or in the Zoom room with us, you know, I guess a bit different to Kashmira. I don't necessarily, I'm based in a central team,
Mm,
in a role that doesn't give me workload necessarily for research, but obviously
mm,
research informs my practice. And if I'm doing my job well, then I should be incorporating some kind of evaluation into my work. So
mm,
there's a justification for doing some sort of research. It's just about how do you make the logistics work and how do you make sure you can still fit it in. And that's where I think like that partnering piece is really useful, because you know if you're working with teaching academics, if you're not based in a central area, you can potentially partner up so that they can get the ethics clearance, um, or and then you can also do the evaluation piece, which then you know you can use to show impact of your work. So I think you know trying to bring in ways to kind of justify is really useful, and find ways to kind of leverage the networks that you have is really useful. If that's, you know, if that's not sort of possible, the other thing that I know, like Kashmir and I have teamed up to do research that doesn't necessarily require ethics clearance, or the ethics clearance is very minimal. For example, you know, we've done autoethnography work, which is very much just reflections, you know, and ideally we're all kind of reflecting on our practice already. And then if you document that, then that can be a form of research. So recognizing, you know, what can fit within your work already and how you can bring research in and out, in those sorts of ways. I don't know if that's answered your question, but
yeah, so just to, I mean, you've mentioned you've collaborated with Kashmira. So, like, what was the topic? Like, what were you collaborating on? What was the autoethnographic, research that you focused on? I think just to share, because Kashmira said, you know, she was developing, designing a few e-portfolio for teaching,
yeah.
building teaching capability. So, what was that particular initiative that you were working? Just to give some ideas to the crowd about, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, for sure. So a few colleagues and you know, including Kashmira and I, we did a piece around third space roles, because we were all working in third space, but and working with technology, enhanced learning, but all coming from slightly different perspectives and angles, you know, slightly different roles. And so it was a good chance to go, oh, actually, like we could all reflect on our roles. We could take Whitchurch's third space work, and use those prompts to reflect upon our past histories and what makes up some of those challenges in the third space, and then
Mm,
look at those reflections and then thematically kind of analyze those to see, you know,
mm,
what commonalities come up, what differences come up. So that was kind of how that work started, was just we were all already kind of, you know, um, colleagues working in the space, you know, talking to each other informally, finding we had similar challenges, and then that formed, you know, a research problem, and then we shaped the methodology to be around that was feasible, that suited what our topic was,
mm,
that gave voice to the kinds of challenges or you know, contexts we were seeing, and could allow for that to happen in a pretty fluid and feasible way. You know, but there's also, you know, we've also done, like Kashmir and I have done conceptual papers. Conceptual papers don't need research clearance. So if you see a problem around, like, for example, you know, like there's multiple problems at the moment in higher education in terms of, you know, dealing with AI challenges, dealing with structural challenges, dealing with systemic challenges, right? All of these things can be unpacked and viewed through a theoretical framework or viewed through a
mm,
particular lens, and then potentially understood better once you start to unpack those through a framework. So, and then you can
mm,
sometimes offer up your own frameworks. But even just doing, a sweep of the existing literature and, recontextualizing that for current problems is still something that, it may not get you, like, obviously it's kind of not necessarily a full study. And so getting, certain publications may not want that kind of work, but it's, conferences and some publications will. Kashmira can, and I'm sure you and Keith will know better than me about those sorts of things. But yeah, so all those things are still valid. They're still research. And then also just like projects, working through a design intervention or a design project or a redesign or, all of those things are things we do in our practice, whether that's as a learning designer or as an academic, is that you identify there's a problem, whether it's that we have to redesign to meet, text requirements for assessment security, or whether, or whether it's because someone's identified a problem in that students aren't engaging in a particular way. Well, how do we redesign? And how do we maybe use a design framework to do that and document that process and what the outputs are? That's still a research project. So, yeah.
Heaps of ideas and heaps of opportunities there. I've got a question, just a leading question for all of you afterwards. But Keith, I'm going to throw it all to you. I don't know, I think maybe something small and also something big or something like that in terms of hard learning everyday work that you're doing.
I was going to say, my advice here would be to look for your allies that can support you in this process. And so what I mean by that is one of the best things that I've done was putting together an open access book that was kind of like a textbook for learning designers. And traditionally, in an academic role, you'd get learning design academics to write chapters and then you'd publish your book that way. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted learning designers to speak to people who are going to become learning designers. So, I put out the call and got lots of people to contribute chapters. And that's exactly what Kashmira and Kate were talking about. It was a chance for them to write in an academic way, reflecting on their practice. It's a bit of a research output. And the end result for me was a really grounded outcome. So I think there are people who want to hear the voices of the practitioners just as much as the academic voices, and it's important to find them. Now, there won't be, it's not everywhere, but there are places to do that. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. And I'm hearing all of you around the work that you do. And there might be others here who are in the third space, thinking, maybe interested. Why do you do research? Like, I'm just kind of curious, why do you do what you do in this space? I know the topics are around introducing research to third space, and people are here interested, what is research? Do I need to put in the effort? No, and we will touch base on constraints and realities around that. And sometimes it can be, there's quite a few barriers around that. But why do you do what you do? Why are you entertaining research? I know, Keith, you're an academic, and that's sometimes part of the workload, is part of the job, etc. I'm kind of just without going too long, like, what's your motivation? What's your passion? Why do you do research around this? And then I'll move on to the constraints and realities.
So do you want me to start? Yeah.
Mm.
So why I do research, there are two reasons. One is that because I'm academic, so my research is an integral part of my promotion process or my career progression. And other thing is that sometimes you want to get to the bottom of something, or something in your work or in your experience that you have felt that requires a little bit deeper answers. And that's why probably I do it. But there are also some times that when you are in collaborative research, you have to see what collectively you are trying to achieve. So sometimes it may not be like 100% of what you think you want to achieve, but it is like collective as a group. and then see what we can achieve as a group. So those are the kind of like ideas or motivation behind what I do.
Mm.
So beautiful, Kashmira. Keith, you look like you want to say something.
No,
Or
you go, Kate. You go.
Okay. All right. I'll try and keep it short because I talked way too long before. I have a master's. I don't have a PhD. I did my master's for a lot of the reasons that Kashmira just mentioned and I think it probably says a lot about why I do learning design as well, or how I do learning design, is that the reason I did my master's was that I was working in a dual sector provider and I could see these challenges for people around, um, getting support and integrating practice. I also was reading, this literature around this policy around the vocational ed sector at the time and this massive injection of funds around e-learning. And then they kind of went, yeah, we've done that, and then pulled the pin while all the data was saying the bar hasn't moved much. And I was like, what is going on here? So I was like, so it's just identifying that there's this problem or this tension that you're seeing in practice, or that the language in policy isn't matching up to what you're seeing in the real world. Or, it's just like identifying that there's this problem that needs to be investigated, or this, feeling you have, like Kashmira was saying, that something's just not, it's just off. And it's like, okay, well, how do we find out more about it? So I think that, if you're interested in kind of finding out, both solutions to problems, but also just unpacking and analyzing problems, which I think is what a lot of learning designers do. I think that, that lends itself to kind of a research process anyway, because it's similar to a design process.
Thank you. Keith, have you got anything to add to that? Your motivations?
Oh, just to reiterate what I think Kate drew out there, the so much of what third space people do is already really closely aligned to research in many, many ways. The other thing, and this is a personal bugbear of mine, and I've seen it done, a lot, is when an academic, sometimes they win teaching awards for this kind of thing, when they've redesigned a subject, or they've implemented a new assessment, or they've developed a whole new course, and they write papers and win awards and that kind of stuff, or they use it in their advanced HE application, for example, without recognizing that more and more this idea that there's one person who's responsible for a subject or a course or whatever. That's not the case, right? If you've developed, if you as a learning designer have been responsible for designing some of the assets, or building the rubric, or taking account of student feedback and making suggestions, I think you're fully entitled to be involved in any kind of research outputs that come as a result of that. And I'd certainly support you in jumping up and down and saying, hang on, what about me? Yeah.
And I
Really,
sorry.
go on.
I also think that it is also sometimes value based. So like when I went when I know more about third space roles and the issues that the whole group as a group they're facing, I just thought that I am now in a position to do something about it. So at least raise my voice, analyze the work situation, and so you see many of the papers that I wrote with Kate, they're all um, focused on some of the areas such as what is our identity, what is the scope of career progression. Are we, like, one of the papers that I'm currently writing is about we are expected to be a leader, but we are a leader without leadership position. So what sort of leadership that we do? So crystallizing all the aspect of our day-to-day work hopefully will like universities or the organizations will hear that, and at least it is discussed in the research, so that people are aware of who we are, what we do, and kind of we can more formalize our roles, which is now like very random.
I mean, part of your question, Leanne, was also about, not just why we do it, but like, I guess that question is like, why would anyone do and I think that's something that everybody has to kind of identify for themselves as to what scope, like what they want to achieve in there. Is it something that they want to move, do they want it for strategic kind of promotion reasons, or do they want it for, their own learning and development reasons, or is it just a personal interest? If there's no interest, like you might not contribute to research, but you might still be using research to inform your practice. So I would hope that most people in the kind of, just in general, like probably you will touch on research somewhere because most of the time you want to kind of be informed by the evidence or by what other people are doing or by lessons learned. But just, I guess, recognizing that like what people's involvement is will vary depending on what they want to get out of things and what kind of problem they can see or identify and what kind of other factors are surrounding there. Um, like what they're working with, like I have a kid and, so my time is going to be limited. I'm not in a central position, so my access may be limited. So I guess it's just recognizing like some of it will be about like, what do you want to get out of it? And then frame it, the way you then frame that will be based on those kind of constraints or circumstances and contexts you're working within.
Thank you, Kate, and I'm back. A bit of a tech blip just then. Yeah, I'm assuming you've moved on to the next question around constraints and realities around that, and I think every single one of you again have lightly touched on some of the constraints that you've experienced, and also offered a bit about how you've navigated this, whether it's around time, mission, and identity. And Keith, and you've mentioned earlier, like I'm with you on that, around the recognition, teaching awards, you have one person, etc. It's a whole team, sports team approach in terms of recognition that's there. But I want to, again, hopefully that last 30 seconds.
Sorry, can I just jump in, Leanne, and just add one more thing to it? Just inspired by what everyone else was saying there. I've worked a lot with like learning designers, and a lot of them have expressed to me, oh, I want to do some research, or I want to publish something, and it's because they're in that third space and they're kind of navigating those tricky challenges. But what often happens is they tell me, I can't because my manager won't give me time. My manager doesn't want me doing this. My manager doesn't see this as valuable. Those kind of institutional roadblocks that seem to emerge. Now, of course, this won't apply to you if you're in one of those lucky roles where you do have support from your manager. But I'm conscious that some of the people in the room may not be in that position. And so I was going to just mention a couple of the ways that I've seen people navigate through this. And the first thing is, and this is a little bit cunning, but I think it's the game you might have to play, is the way that you present the work that you want to do. So I wouldn't necessarily lead with the fact that I'm going to do some research with academic XYZ about a subject redesign that we did. Instead, I would talk in terms of evaluation, a record of impact, and improving the practices and the contribution that'll make to our unit, to the institution, to the university as a whole. And I think if you can just change the focus of the conversation, I think that's probably going to be a better way forward. We all know that evaluation is the part that's most often overlooked when it comes to learning or instructional design. So I think if you can make the case for this being a really important part of your work and not in addition to your work, you're much more likely to get the thumbs up from your manager.
And I agree with that, Keith. I certainly agree with that language and the approach. Sometimes I'll just add to that as well. A lot of the work that I do at the moment is very similar to that. I work with a lot of learning designers, academic developers. I work with students along the way. I really do use the word research, the same as you as well, Keith. We do a lot of work, scholarly work. We want to make sure we unpack things, we solve problems, we produce solutions. A lot of the work falls in that quality assurance space, that evaluation. But I think if you're looking to do with research, you want to publish, you want to get it out there, etc., there's certainly ways to do that. And I think there's heaps of opportunities. And I think just to reiterate, you mentioned impact, improving practice, whether it's enhancing student experience, teaching capability around that. I think it's the language. So that's a really good tip there. And I know, Kashmir, if you had an opportunity to add to that, the kind of constraints or around navigating research around that. And I think you've mentioned you've had a really colorful, career pathway, but you're in a really fortunate situation where you've got a lot of freedom, authority to do what you can do in that space. But I think maybe if you can share maybe some of the, I don't know, the barriers, some rough points, some of the constraints that you had to deal with and how you navigated that.
Yeah, I don't want to reiterate what Keith and Kate already said, but I think what Keith said is one of the ways that to go overcome, like using the right language. I know in this meeting now there are some people who had that problem faced by institution that they can't involve into certain programs or things like that. And I think language matters a lot. However, I think that using a very sophisticated and also something that more of a, in benefit of the institution, that kind of language, not everybody is able to do that. And especially because we are more of a professional staff, we are not used to that kind of language, very academic and very sophisticated language. Then what you do? And I have faced that, and I want to kind of like, and I have no shame in saying this, that English is my fifth language, and I find it exceptionally hard to put things or articulate things in a way that is more meaningful to the other person. And it should be more meaningful to other person. That was also the idea that I came to know very late in my life, which was a bit pity. But that is how the world is. So knowing about the opportunity and articulating things around how it can align with strategic direction of the institution, that might be kind of like an undeniable then to say, okay, I am trying to do this, which align with this strategic direction and how it is going to benefit our, either it's a central unit or individual team. If that's the narrative that you can generate, that would be quite helpful. So one of the productivity seminar I attended, and they said that do not talk about you, just talk about what you do and how it is aligning with and benefiting the institution or the company. So I think that's a good point. For me, organizational barriers were less in this current university, but in other universities there were a lot. Even though I had PhD, they won't listen because of, oh, you are a learning designer, so just do what I say and then just move on, that kind of. And I think communication is one of the ways, but there are some things which is, I think, mainly the relationship between professional and academic staff is still quite a lot of work in all the institutions to just fill that gap. I think it's still a huge gap, which might be very frustrating for professional staff.
Yeah, certainly. And in terms of like, I'm like Keith and others here as well, you mentioned impact around your work, around visibility and impact. And we know traditionally research, you've got peer review journals, etc. Like to you, what counts as output, within your context, and how do you balance that publishing, but also other forms of impact, and what can that actually look like rather than just peer review journals? And I know, Keith, you mentioned open educational resources as part of your work, but what are some other areas that you can enhance that visibility and the things that you've dealt with within your context?
Do you want to go, Kate?
No, I think you go because my comment in the chat is linked to something quite political.
Oh.
So I'm happy to talk about it, but I will get a bit controversial, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought your comment in the chat was really good. All right. I'll just say a couple of words, and I won't wander into your territory, Kate. A couple of things. Um, Yeah, just picking up on what Kashmira said about people who don't recognise the things you work. And I'm going to be a bit blunt here. You can't work with assholes, right? Um, so don't try. There will be some people at your institution that no matter how good you are and no matter how much work you do for them, they may never value the work that you do as a learning designer or a third space academic. And I'm a big fan of not wasting your time. By all means, try once, but then if they choose to, not have that opportunity to work with someone as excellent as yourself, you just move on because you will find people who value the work that you do, who are generous, who are open. I mean, this is higher education, right? Everyone's brilliant, but not everyone's nice. And I'd spend your time finding the people who are nice to work with. Um, so anyway, that's the first thing. The second thing is I'd look yeah, the Holy Grail, right, is a publication in the Australian Journal of Educational Technology or something like that, right? But there's a lot of steps and things along the way before you need to even think about doing that. So I really like, um, trying out your writing chops in terms of like blogs for specific organizations. So if you've got a central teaching and learning unit or even a faculty teaching and learning unit that you're attached to, write a blog for them where you talk about what you did and you evaluated it and you found out this is just, really good practice. And it also helps you develop your writing, but it also helps you get your name out there. And you'd be surprised how many people actually read those blogs, because they're accessible, they're easy, they're fun. And then I'd go beyond that and look at external organizations, right? So I can see Kashmir put the Ascolite blog. Yes, they're always looking for people to publish in that as well. You can even do some really good stuff on LinkedIn. Can I be honest? I am so sick of the slop of AI. It seems like every second post I see on LinkedIn is generated by AI, and maybe it's not, but gee, it looks like it, right? So it's wonderful when you come across, a well-written piece by somebody who's taken the time to reflect and maybe, acknowledge that they haven't got it 100% right or whatever, you know. So I'd put yourself out there in that respect as well. So that's really good too. And then the other place that I'd suggest looking for is, um, you know, it's often actually easier to get chapters published than it is to get academic journals. So look for those opportunities. And certainly, I know that Kashmira, Kate, and Leanne and we're all putting together these learning design OERs. So we'd be keen to hear from you as well in those spaces. Yeah. All right. Go on, Kate. Be political.
I don't know. And I don't want to out anybody in this room, but I did notice a chat message because I'm conscious that we record this. I don't think the chat was recorded, but if that person wants to comment verbally, please feel free. So a comment came up about, and I think it links to my comment in the chat around like this tension or this misunderstanding and mistaking impact for output. I think there's, in the research field, there's a lot of pressure for output, obviously, but also in like high impact journals. in my kind of field and our roles, there's a really big push for output as the measure of our KPIs, essentially. I'll call them KPIs, they get called different things, but essentially our performance is measured often based on outputs, even though it may not actually have any impact. And so, because a lot of times in the work we do, we don't really do the evaluation piece or do it well, which means that we don't necessarily know whether it made an impact or not. And sometimes I probably do know it didn't make that much of an impact because maybe I only got 2 people in a room for a workshop, right? It's like, is that a good return on investment? So there's this tension around, I think, and this is where I think managers can step in, is about, how do we rethink? And I'm not calling anybody out because I'm actually in a pretty good situation right now where we are rethinking a lot of what we do and looking at like what is worth holding on to, how can we measure impact, how can we actually gather the data that we need to make decisions about how we shape things and what we do with things, while also talking about how do we rebuild our team for scale so that we actually can then spend the time and effort on the high impact stuff instead of the low impact stuff. So, for example, trying to build up the foundations with guides so that then if somebody comes to us wanting help, we can just send them the guide and then move on and then have the time to do projects, for example, or have the time to do research. So it's just recognizing like, how do you measure stuff? How do you shape your team culture to give yourselves time to do the stuff that you think is important and valuable? And how do you build that in as a culture? So I think that's where, unfortunately, sometimes there's this disconnect, especially in our work, where if you have, higher level leadership roles who don't understand the work we do and think it's about, redesigning number of units or, producing X workshops, producing X guides, that might become the measure of impact. And then because the work is so slammed or the team's under-resourced or there's but you're being asked to do kind of big redesign projects all the time, or you're being asked to do more and more business as usual tasks, that kind of, you've got no room to kind of do the thinking, as was mentioned in the chat. So I think it's just recognizing like a little bit of like, how do we build the culture to give the time? How do we manage up a little bit to advocate around like, the difference between output and impact? What do these roles do? What does this work look like? What should it look like? So I think, unfortunately, I don't have answers to that. I guess I'm just recognizing that, like, I feel people's pain in that space and I'm sympathetic to that. So I just wanted to note that is a legitimate kind of challenge, is just around the workload that even, but it's also like sometimes a bit of a misunderstanding about what we should be spending our time on, but it requires kind of a rethinking around that. So, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is there.
That's exactly what I was going to say in answer to Karina, but you said it so much better than me, Kate. Well done.
Oh, can I also add to this?
Karina was, sorry.
Yeah. What if your culture is so rigid that you can't change it and you don't have time or skills to change the culture and you're too busy to do the research? So what do you do then? So I think easiest way to get started with small research is find some collaborators. That will save you time, because if 5 people are working on one paper, obviously you will have less to do in the paper. So, but you still have something. Also, there are opportunities that you can contribute very little and still get published. For example, I can give you one example. There is a student as partner journal sometimes ask for field voice from the field. So what they ask you to do is that write 100 words about whatever that you are doing, or some sort of like a answer to one or two questions, and then they collect all of that as a journal article. But then you are a one of the authors on the journal articles. You know what I mean? So just start with, it's not like And it is my experience, and it was very suffocating that you can't break that barrier and say, oh, I want to do this, I have this idea, but I can't do it because my boss says this, and like I have a lot of work and I have did this and that. But in the end, the thing is that we have to find some way out. And once you have a good collaborative team, or once you know a lot of people around, I think you will enjoy talking to them, little bit venting out, having your ideas outside, or you can write your blogs and tag it into LinkedIn or something like that, so that I see that there are lots of stealing of ideas happening as well. So you went to your boss and say, oh, I have a fantastic idea, and because you don't have time to do anything and they do, they will say, oh, this is my project. And then you will be angry and upset and sad in your heart. So rather just write somewhere, even if it is a LinkedIn post, but write something nice and thoughtful, and make sure that you own it. Because some of the universities, and Kate would probably endorse this, that they don't even let your names put on the university blogs. So that is also the challenge. So you have to be a little bit strategic around how you handle those kind of things.
Thank you. And that's really interesting. And I'm also monitoring the chat at the same time as well. That's really good responses and feedback. So we're hearing collaboration, starting off small. You don't have to go big peer review journal. Start off small, work with people. And I concur with everyone here, Keith. Work with people who like you and you like them. You're not gonna work. Not everyone's gonna love you at the same time. So find your tribe, your support network around that, and that's important. And obviously, if you're in a position, you manage up, you manage down, you manage sideways, and I think that's really important. With the last few minutes, what I would like to do is just throw it to the floor. We've got a really engaging area, but if anyone wants to put anything in the chat or take their mic and just ask questions, whether just anything at all around what's been said so far, or maybe there's some prompts around what's the current challenge that you're experiencing right now in embarking your research journey. But any questions? Perhaps I might maybe be a bit more specific. What's one research-related challenge you're currently experiencing, navigating at the moment?
Please feel free to take if you wish to use a mic. And I've also put another prompt in the chat if people aren't sure of the research question. Great.
Hello.
Hi, Karina, go for it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Kate and Kate, for the answers. So yes, I've been working as a leader for a couple of years in learning design for 2 universities now. I'm in Adelaide University, and I guess for us, as I said, as a manager, you need to do other things, like you're building a team, you're dealing with admin tasks, and sometimes you don't have that space to reflect, stop, think. And I feel that sometimes the word research is too big. Maybe if we start with something smaller, will help us thinking about these blog ideas. Or I'm just talking because I know that some of my team members are here, so maybe it's just about just starting very small, because research for me, it feels overwhelming. So yeah, what do you think about that?
No, I think that's wonderful, and I think I'll add to that. Like in my previous role in previous life, I was also a manager of a particular learning design academic development in Japan, and I was always really supportive of innovation and because like people who know me know that I say I believe every single individual is a leader in their own right. And I wanted the group to think innovation, to go out there and share, disseminate their work. And it might be a blog, it might be organizing a teaching celebration event within your group, within your department, faculty, to contribute. Practice writing, practice presenting, practice what is new, what is innovative about your research, what are the problem challenges, what did you do, and what's the solution at the end. And it could be starting off small like that, celebrating and thinking about different ideas. But certainly, I think there's so many opportunities, and I said we're here in collaboration. Don't do it alone if you're starting something new. You have certain expertise in various areas, and find your tribe, find the people who that click, that will work with you, and leverage off that will have different skill sets. The language and how you approach this is important, and dealing with people and managing people just is as well. Just note for that there is a couple of minutes left. Part of this topic, we have a research mentoring program as part of our Learn Design, and it's based on feedback from our community of practice, from our community, trying to unpack what are the key topics, key ideas, key concerns, how do I get into research? So this is the second year running, and this is the first of our topics. We have 4 more topics going forward as well. We're here to support our Learning Design community, so please do reach out. Keith, Kashmira, Kate, and I are very open to all of that. Our community of practice, happy to share some ideas, to speak to you. And also, this recording will be available and made available shortly and uploaded and communicated onwards. But I do want to thank, Keith and Kate and Kashmira for their time. So thank you for their time sharing your thoughts and lived experiences. And but also thank you to everybody in the room as well for spending time. And I think let's keep the conversation going. We're here to support and uplift and contribute to the field. We know that the third space identity there's a lot of challenges, but there's a lot of positive that we've gained a long way over the last few years in this. But we're here to support each other. So thank you to everybody here today.
And also in the forthcoming webinars, you will hear about publishing formal and informal form of research, some resources where you can get published and all of that. So please stay tuned, and we will have more detailed discussion in those webinars as well.
Everyone.
Thank you. Just stop the recording